There you go.
All right. Do you want a pickle? What do you think? This is where
Take this home.
we have so much pickle on the desk.
You're not dressed up and you're gonna stink like pickle for freaking David Letterman.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, why are we showing an old clip where I'm in a suit from like 3 years ago, and then I remembered, oh, I wore a suit for Letterman. Yeah. I've worn a suit exactly one time since the pandemic.
Yeah, because you changed that. You know, you've gotten much more relaxed. Let's talk about the pandemic, man. I mean, you really like thrived during that in your attic of all. I'm scared to death to go into my attic. I won't do that.
You know, weirdly, to be without an audience, you could either panic and withdraw, or you could realize, oh, this is the only time we're gonna ever have to try everything we've ever wanted to try. Because even the bad ideas play to silence. You know, the good ideas play to silence. So at some point, the only thing you're judging it on is how much you like to do it. And so it was a really, you know, obviously a terrible time, and you know, continues to have this long tail. But you know, creatively, it was sort of thrilling, and also weirdly, you just stopped worrying about other things because you had to like worry about all this granular stuff, like setting up your own lights and figuring out how to, you know, we're a teleprompter app and all these weird things that you had to do all of a sudden that you never had to worry about, and it just emptied out your head to just take make choices.
You had to set up your camera and everything else and do that all yourself.
I never had a single person with me in the attic. Yeah, it was crazy. I told this story the other day, but it was really nice actually, because the first thing was I didn't know how the show was going because there wasn't an audience, so I went to the YouTube comment section and everybody was like, "This show looks like shit." And they said like, "What are you shooting it on an iPad camera?" Which really hurt my feelings because we were. But then there was a guy named Matt. I can't remember his last name, but he made a YouTube video that was like a 15-minute YouTube video where basically the premise was, and he was a YouTuber, and he was like, I really like these late night hosts, but they don't know what they're doing. Because we were all figuring it out, right? And he wasn't snarky about it. He was like, I like these guys, I feel bad for them, they obviously have no idea how people like us are doing this. And he did like 5 tips. And I actually DM'd him on Twitter, and I said, hey, thank you so much for making that. Can I ask you some follow-up questions? And he and I became like Twitter friends. And I will say it was that, you know, because obviously I think, you know, a very fair stereotype about the internet is like people are mean. But there are also like people who are nice. And he was like, oh great. And he was like, here's what you're doing wrong with your sound. Here's where you should move in your attic. And it was great. And the show just got better, and it was fun to know it was getting slowly better.
Oh wait a minute. You work for NBC.
Yeah.
And they have the best technicians in the world.
Yeah.
And you are relying on some guy from Twitter.
Yeah.
What's wrong with this picture?
I remember I called NBC and I said, can you guys come? And they were like, we can give you a password for Peacock. we can give you 2 months. They said, we can give you 2 months free of Peacock. And I said, I thought Peacock was free for everybody. And they're like, we can only do 2 months. The only thing I'll say is it was early COVID, and it was a time where, and I will say, we had young kids. We were on the spectrum of the most afraid, and we didn't want a whole team of people like tromping through the house to like set up a situation.
Like technicians.
Yeah. And it ultimately, there was also something fun about the DIY part of it. I don't know how much better it was going to look. Probably a lot. But you know, there was something too taking advantage of the fact that it was the only time you could do a show that looked like that where everybody at home would understand why. Right. And so that was, you know, I don't think there's ever a time where everybody at home watching your show was to some degree experiencing the same thing that you were. And so there was kind of a collective connection that was worth trying to hold on to.
Well, in the entire history of television, that hasn't happened. You lived through a very unique period here. This, the last pandemic like this was 100 years ago, so TV wasn't around.
Right?
So you gotta
It was like 60 years till late night started. Yeah. It's kick-ass math for you.
There you go. I'm just curious about your attic. So you're in your attic, and are there creatures in there? Or
We had tons of wasps, and we think we had flying squirrels on the wall. And they really like the impressions. Like, I had Ethan Hawke in my attic. Like the real. He's a friend, and I was like, I had this little tiny door. It's just like a storage door, but a lot of people were saying on YouTube, like, where's that tiny door go? And I was like, oh, I should have Ethan come out of that tiny door. And so I said, will you come out of my tiny door? He was like, yeah, man. And this was before moving. He was like,
so good.
This is the best offer I've got. Middle of the pandemic, Ethan's like, yeah, nobody's doing anything. I'll do it. And so he came over, and I was like, here's the thing, I'm gonna do this, and you'll poke your head out. It was basically me talking about, like, everybody's asking what that door is. It's not like Ethan Hawke's in there, and he would, like, poke his head out. It was so hot. It was in the summer, and it was so hot in the attic. And it was like, it felt like 110 degrees. And Ethan was in, so then I made him, like, go into a tiny, dark space, and I kept flubbing my lines. And he was, like, behind the attic door, he's like, how many more times are we gonna do this, bud? Get pretty sweaty behind this mask. But that's the kind of thing that you get to do. And it was, at the time, it was like a trip. You're like, I can't believe we're like just doing I can't believe this is a talk show. It feels like it's not the kind of show you would make when you were 14 years old and your parents gave you a video camera and you wanted to do a talk show.
It's a fun thing.
It was fun.
That's it.
Yeah.
Ethan Hawke, a good guest. I love the show you did with John Mulaney shortly after you did an intervention with him.
Yeah.
That's raw television, my friend.
It was, yeah. Every now and then, you have to create space for that. It's obviously a little easier with someone you know and love, like John. But, mostly you just feel lucky those times to have a platform to let something very authentic like that happen. I was very lucky to have Gerard Carmichael on just last week, and it was sort of a similar feeling of just watching somebody you have so much love and respect for share a thing like that on your show is you feel very fortunate.
That's a great thing to have a platform like that you can do that kind of thing and just, when it comes up, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, and I also have a great appreciation that our audience knows when that's what the show's going to be that night, and you can feel them appreciate, this isn't going to be about, set up joke, set up joke. We're actually watching two people who know each other talk about something.
Exactly.
Difficult.
And I'm sure most of you, how many saw David Letterman on late night? Yeah. Well, why aren't the rest of you watching it here? That was an amazing show.
It was great.
He came on, it was the 40th anniversary. What was that like to have Letterman on?
It's, again, there's a lot of times you pitch yourself, but the first iteration of the show I ever watched was David Letterman. David Letterman was a thing that when I was young, you knew it was cool because everybody older than you loved it. And then to have him come on the show and you seemed like he enjoyed being there, and that makes you feel like you had.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
You could tell he was like right at home and wanted to be there.
And then you hadn't sort of fucked the whole thing up was a nice feeling.
Did you plan the whole thing out with him before, like you normally do on a talk show?
Not at all. There was no. We had a segment producer talk to him, but I think Dave, in the same way, is a guest the same way he was a host, which is he's not gonna stick to the plan. If the minute it becomes more interesting to talk about something else that came up, and part of it is just knowing that it's going to be better if it's not rushed, if you're not trying to tick off a blueprint you've laid out ahead of time. And so it was just like, just be in the moment and appreciate the fact that you're lucky enough to sit and talk to David Letterman.
Yeah, which is amazing, and he there's a reason he's beloved. He's done it, and a lot of other talk show hosts obviously look up to him. Jimmy Kimmel always gives him props.
Yeah, and it was really fun to know that he was coming and realize you could probably only have time to ask him about one old bit. And so I just spent the week watching old YouTube clips of, and it's really, and now there's this really great YouTube channel of his where you can watch everything, and you cannot believe the things he was doing in, the early 80s. That would be so cutting edge if it was happening today as well.
Yet he has his own insecurities because he started on NBC with a morning show.
Yeah.
That he feels he destroyed their entire daytime lineup.
Yeah.
That nobody watched, and he thought his career was over.
It's really funny how, it still seems like he's like, do you think they forgot about the morning show? I'm like, I don't think anybody knows. I don't think anybody knows you did a morning show. It'd be like me if I'm still like, you guys, I did a bad improv show in Chicago in 1996. I hope I'm not going to bring that up tonight.
Well, let's take a look at David Letterman on Late Night with Seth Meyers.
But the thing about my mom, and everybody would say, oh, we love your mother, and I would say, yeah, try living with her for 18 years. But she was the textbook definition of taciturn.
Mm-hmm.
Just, Mom, a lot of that. So we decided to send her to Norway for the Olympics, I think, after...
Not to compete.
No, she was competing.
Yeah, She did poorly, if I recall.
She did not medal. We don't say she did poorly. We say
She did not medal.
No.
So there you are wearing your suit. Why did you feel compelled to wear your suit with David Letterman?
There's a sign of respect. I had a sense that he would show up in a suit, and I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be less well dressed as.
Did you ask him, do all talk show hosts when they end their show just grow out this gray beard?
I know, I'm looking forward to it. You know what the best thing about watching that clip is, and if you watch old Letterman clips, is how much he enjoys language and the way words sound. And watching David Letterman say taciturn, that is such a Letterman thing. When you watch, and it's a really, one of the many things that he did that I aspire to is, I don't know, there was just a real appreciation of like how words sound in your mouth and to the ear that you say them to. It was cool to be there.
It's so great. That's a keeper. There's are there other shows that you've done that you like look at something like that and you say, wow, that was good?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really cool thing where, I now have 3 kids, but my first 2 kids were born on Sundays, and I took a day off with my first son, and then I got to come in on Tuesday, and the monologue was just, hey, I'm a dad now, and it was really cool in real time to talk about that and have jokes, obviously, but it's a cool thing to know I'll be able to go back and watch myself 2 days after Ash was born and see exactly how that looked. And then my next kid was born in the lobby of our apartment building on a Sunday as well.
Lobby baby!
They all know.
Lobby baby, yeah.
Because they saw that show.
And I got that day. He was born on a Sunday as well, and I said to my wife, I'm like, I don't want to wait till Tuesday. You gotta let me go in on Monday and tell the story. And she's like, I give up, you can go. She's like, it was a good story, you gotta go. Yeah.
I was born on a Sunday, and I never got that. I never had that.
Yeah.
But I was born on a Sunday.
Congratulations. I don't know what day you were born.
Because my parents told me that at St. John's Hospital, the nun in the room said, he's born on a Sunday, so he will either do nothing or he'll be a writer.
Wow.
That's literally what I was told.
Well, how can you forget
And
that?
I did both those things.
It's one of the few jobs where you can accomplish both. Ash was born on Easter Sunday.
Oh, it's coming up.
Yeah, and we walked in, and all the nurses were wearing bunny ears. And I remember, and my wife was like in very painful labor as we were walking in, and I remember like just seeing nurses, and I went, oh look! And looking at her and just realizing she was not at a place where she could appreciate bunny ears. I'm like, I might not point out any more costumes to her.
That's great. I wanted to ask you about your earlier days, and watching David Letterman reminded me of this because as a writer, I was a writer and writing comedy, trying to get jobs, and I got a job with a guy that does kid shows, a treehouse show, where I wrote for a squirrel and a spider and things like that called Dusty Treehouse. But I sat around the producer's house and I saw all these scripts that he had around, and I looked, and they're all spec scripts, you know, as they say, from different sitcoms. And I came upon one that said The Bob Newhart Show, written by David Letterman. And I go like, what? Stu, his name is Stu Rosen. I go like, what is this? David Letterman wrote a spec script of Bob Newhart, and he said, oh yeah, he came up, he was this guy, you know, when he came up, he was a kid, a guy from Indiana, drove up in his pickup truck, came over and wanted a job on this kid's show, and I just said, he doesn't have it. He's not right. I could tell from that. I go like, that's David Letterman.
Yeah.
That you never know, and, you know, and you scrap around and try to get these jobs and things, and it was clear that he did that too, coming into Hollywood and things, and you did that too. I mean, you were in improv in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that though, I was really lucky. I was I finished college and I was, waiting tables and improvising in Chicago, and all I wanted to do was Second City. That was that was my goal. And then these Chicago guys started a comedy theater in Amsterdam called Boom Chicago, and my friend Pete Gross and I auditioned for it and got the job, and we kind of didn't think we'd get the job. I didn't even have a passport at the time. And I just got to move. I lived in Amsterdam for 2 years, and it was, I might have peaked then. That might have been, like, things have gone very well since, but like not that good.
That's so bizarre to me, because that's a whole different country, different language,
Yeah.
and you're doing comedy.
Yes, it was just such a good incubator. Like, what you need more than anything is just hours and stage time. And to some degree, the audience matters, but you also just need to you would need to learn your own voice. And sometimes the only way you can learn it is by saying it out loud and in front of people. And I was also really lucky. I was there at an incredible time with, Kay Cannon and Jordan Peele and Jason Sudeikis and Ike Barinholtz and Josh Myers, my brother, and we were all there at the same time.
Yeah, Jason Sudeikis, I think, developed Ted Lasso.
Yeah, so Brendan Hunt and Joe Kelly were also people who were over there, and so it was just a really cool time to be with, we were all really young. All we wanted to be doing was comedy, and we got to do it in Amsterdam. Oh, I will say it's where I learned that stoned audiences are bad audiences. Like, people are like, oh, it must be so great doing comedy in Amsterdam. They must laugh at everything. And you're like, yeah, they do. Like, even like the nothing. Like they laugh when you walk out to do a sketch. They laugh at the hat. And you're like, we haven't even started. So that was an education.
And you got sort of notice from Chicago Boom, or the thing that sort of was developed there?
Well, so I was doing Boom Chicago, and then my partner and I, Joe Benjamin, we went back to Chicago after 2 years, and we started doing a two-person show, and that's what someone at SNL saw.
And where they saw it. So you make it sound so simple.
I mean, it is the thing. It's so hard to give advice to young comedians, but the one thing that I think is the best advice is, like, get up on stage every time somebody asks you, and try to find your way out, because you never know the night the person who's going to change your life is going to be in the audience. So you can only increase your odds if you're on stage more. There's no guarantee they're ever going to be there, but just go be out there.
And the best thing you learned from, you mentioned Second City, for which you got applause here. There's
that's
obviously
Chicago.
Second City fans.
By the way, I never got hired in Second City, so take it back.
But there's that. I answered an ad in Variety once that said, come to the Second City workshop in Pasadena. They had tried to come out here, and they had never been out here. And they were next to a bowling alley and in Pasadena, and I just sat in the parking lot for about an hour, and I can't go in. I'm not an actor, but I figure I could be a writer in there and get something out of it. And I went in, and Joe Flaherty was one of the people that interviewed me and said, okay, because they'd take anybody. And I did it, and I did the Second City workshop. John Candy was in it, and these wonderful people. And I learned so much from a point of view of a writer, but you know what I learned? Yes, and. That was it. Never say no in comedy. Don't cut it down. Is that the big lesson from that?
Yes. I will say the other great lesson I picked up from improvising that has been incredibly important with the show is how important listening is. And that you can't improvise. You can't do a scene with a scene partner if you're not listening to them. If you're thinking about the next thing you're going to say, you're already bad. in the seat. And ultimately, so much of interviewing people, you think it's about asking questions, but it's really about listening to the answers. And so I think being an improviser, because the one thing that I had never approached at all before I had this talk show was interviewing people. And so that was a nice building block skill that I picked up from improvising.
Good lessons to learn.
Yeah, not bad. Be a good listener. I remember when I got on the show, I was like, I'm gonna really practice listening to everybody I talk to. And I remember having conversations with my parents on the phone and just like really listening. And then dawning on me of like, oh, I never listen to them. And I'm like, this is a lot. When you're listening to every word, you're like, oh boy. I've been tuning out pretty quickly.
That's the best. That's the best. Well, now you're a mogul, and you're producing things, the Amber Ruffin Show. You're producing a show called Corrections, which is an offshoot producing
Yeah.
on YouTube and things, and you know you're the next Lorne Michaels, and you know all of that. That's fun to do, right? I mean,
it's fun to do. I mean, I think that having anything outside the body of the show is just a really nice way to, I don't know, keep things. If you just focus on the show, the repetition of doing it at some point is just gonna, I don't know, numb your nerves to the excitement and the butterflies of trying something new. So both within the body of the show and then outside of it, you're just always trying to do new things and with something like Amber, like Elevate kind of show that isn't on TV, hasn't been on TV historically. And then, when you do something like Corrections, it's just like a silly way to deconstruct the show that would maybe feel a little indulgent if it was within the body of the show, but if you're just going to put it on YouTube, you can kind of take your time with it, and that's really fun too.
how do you come up with Corrections? How did you say, wow, this is going to morph its way into a radio?
I started, the Corrections started because I called Legos, and you're supposed to say Lego bricks, and a lot of adults who care deeply about
Jackals.
What?
Jackals.
Jackals, yes. We call people who correct me jackals. And, I call them that. They proudly refer to themselves as it, that's progress. So I basically started just addressing every single YouTube comment that told me I got something wrong. But it's been this really nice symbiotic relationship because I'm not actually mad, but I pretend like I am. And I think the jackals aren't actually mad that I make mistakes, but they pretend like they are. And so we're doing this weird performative like art piece where all week long they tell me like, you're dumb, you did this wrong, and then I do like 20 minutes at the end of the week where I'm like, I did this wrong, but actually you guys are wrong because I was right. And it's really, I don't know, it's not a thing that I ever thought we'd do, and I look forward to it a lot.
Amazing. Yeah. Let's take a look at Corrections.
Josh's gonna show a correction.
A well-crafted joke about genitals always reminds me of my good friend Andy Samberg. And 3 corrections back, with no warning, I FaceTimed him. He answered right away. He banged out some fine young cannibals for us. And then I've been chasing the ghost. Called in the last 2 weeks, nothing. And part of me thinks that's a sign. I should just let it go. But they didn't just do 1 digital short, they did 100, right? The guy can deliver, so, I can't stress enough. He does not know I'm calling. Sing Counting Crows, Mr. Jones and You. Mr. Jones. How are you, buddy? Pretty good. I gotta go.
So I should know, I do that Thursday after the show, after the audience leaves. So it's just me and the crew. And I don't tell Andy, again, 3 weeks in a row, I just called him and it just went to voicemail. But that's the sort of riveting television. And I should also notice I was wearing a knitted Jackal Power hat. I ran afoul of the knitting community. I can't even remember what I said in the beginning. I think I said they sewed something, and they were like, we don't sew, we knit. Anyway, I just really doubled down. And then this really lovely knitting expert named Patty Lyons sent me kept sending me like a jackal hat and then a jackal sweater, and it was great. I mean, again, it's like better than Game of Thrones.
No,
As far as world building,
yeah. It's, you know what, watching that, it's raw television, it's what people love, you know, it's real.
Yeah.
And it's just off the cuff, and that's it. And that's what your day drinking thing is too. I mean, you're really drunk when you do that.
Yeah. I'm a bad actor, so I gotta get drunk.
So you have to get drunk.
Yeah.
Which I've never seen people really do. Dean Martin, of course.
Yeah,
faked
phony
it.
drunk. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was never drunk. He'd just come in on
Yeah,
Sunday.
there's a famous in my family picture of after I did day drinking with Rihanna, I came home and fell asleep I opened the door, walked in the apartment, and fell asleep in the hallway. And my wife put a glass of water next to me and then just went to bed. Yeah. And I should note, the other thing about that is Rihanna had exactly as much to drink as me, and then I'm pretty sure she went out. I felt like she made me feel like a child. Yeah.
And she was your dream guest, I think.
Yeah, no, there's everything's downhill from that.
That was it, right? So you got drunk together, and that's the end of the road.
That's the end of the road. And I think, you know what though? I was like, I think I impressed upon her the importance of the family. And the weird thing is everybody's like, you must want to be her now. I'm like, no, she wants to be me.
Well, before I go, because we are going to get some questions, a little question time from the audience.
Love it.
Just like the Carol Burnett show.
Yeah.
But I have to ask you about the political nature of the show. We saw you doing Trump and all of that. Is Trump just a gift to comedians?
No, not really. I'd rather he wasn't around. But I'm not going to pretend he's not around just because I don't. He puts me in a bad mood. Because I do think it's a very serious thing.
Yeah.
And it's a very real thing. And as much as some of us might want to move on, we're not going to do that until we feel like it's over.
Well, it's important because a lot of people get their news from talk shows, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where they see things, and and you're carrying on him, Don Jr., who you did an impression of as well, Tucker Carlson, all of them. It's just like rich for comedy.
Well, it's just, when reality is so outlandish, it does give you you do feel like, I remember years at SNL where the news story of the week was whether or not they were going to raise the debt ceiling. And that's where you wish something crazy was happening. Where it's both dry and nobody really understands it, and you're trying to write jokes about it. Like, so there is, I have had those weeks as well. With that said, I can't stress enough how I would, at this point, prefer to live in a boring comedy desert as opposed to the fertile, terrifying times we live in. It would be nice.
Well, I think that's what's behind that book we all started with an hour ago here. I'm not scared, you're scared, because there's real stuff coming out of it.
Yeah, I will say, when I started writing it was like 2 years ago, and it was way more about how when you have kids, you start realizing that they have a relationship with fear, and as a parent, you want to tell them the things they should and shouldn't be afraid of, but ultimately they have to find that on their own. And there is a good kind of fear, fear is not necessarily a terrible thing. You want your kids to have an internal fear clock that tells them, I shouldn't go to the top of this jungle gym at this age or whatever. But it is weird how when the book came out, it was a time where I think a lot of parents were trying to figure out how to talk to their kids about really scary things that are happening.
And just last week, there was with Jimmy Kimmel, Marjorie Taylor Greene reported him to the Capitol Police for a joke.
I said that. I tipped her off. Well, he loves pranks, so I thought he'd like that. No, she did, yeah.
The same Capitol Police she refused to support, but nevertheless. Anybody that you fear out there that has ever done anything like that to you, or that has complained about anything you've done?
I will say there are times where I don't get the friendliest feedback on social media, but I have not had
I certainly have not had a sitting member of Congress, call the cops on me. or report me to the authorities, yeah.
Scary times indeed.
Yeah.
If we can bring up the lights, or maybe down those lights, and I can see you, yes, you've got some questions, and I am gonna take it from you because you're just waving your hands there, that's you right there, yeah.
Thank you so
Go.
much. So, love your show, and I don't want to.
Oh, hang on, I've got a microphone for you.
Here it comes.
Yes. There is a microphone coming your way.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I want to put you on the spot, and I know it maybe is boring, but can you explain cryptocurrency?
No. Not in any way that would be rewarding.
Okay. Right here. Okay, right here. Keep the mic coming down here. There you go. We'll get you back there.
First of all, I have to say thank you for those 4 years you helped us get to Trump.
Thank you very much.
And I will ask, did NBC say easy child with any of the stuff you want to say about Trump, or were you free to say anything you wanted?
I was free to say anything I wanted. I will say I've never at any point doing the show had the network interfere or even intervene or even give any notes as to we think it should be more like this or more like that. So, I am now over 20 years of working for NBC, and I feel incredibly well treated as far as letting my creativity be the guide. So I'm really lucky.
Okay, somebody, okay, right there. You got a mic in the striped shirt. Yes, keep your hand up right there. Yes, that's him.
What does better late than ever mean? Because late is ever.
Yeah.
So,
You a jackal. I will say, every year they make like a publicity poster, and before you said that was one of my favorites, this one. And now I'm overcome with doubt.
Okay, because he's so clever with the light, or whoever that is, with the light. Yes. I can't see. Oh, yeah.
All right. I have a friend, it may be me, but it may not be me, who's an investigative reporter and believes in adversarial journalism, and I believe your work is doing that. But this friend is interested in seeing how maybe they can write for you or support. This friend is interested.
It's always nice to hear that people are interested. We are at a full capacity writing staff right now, but hopefully our paths will cross in the future.
really?
Okay, yes, hi, in the white, so right there.
Hello, I'm a big fan of yours. You're amazing.
Thank you.
You're great. I've seen you many times. I just have a question for you. I was wondering, I'm sure you get this all the time, what was the craziest memory from SNL? The best memory ever? What was the worst memory? What was the most, surreal or strangest memory from being on SNL?
I mean, I've talked about this before, but it was when the real Sarah Palin came on. And she came on Weekend Update, and the conceit of the bit was that she was going to do a hardcore rap, but then she thought better of it, and then Amy Poehler did the hardcore rap as her in front of her. And adding to the surreal nature of it, Poehler was 9+ months pregnant. And so Amy was doing this incredible, it just holds up so well. It's one of the most riveting performances, and it's so thrilling that it's live. And also, I'm just sitting with Sarah Palin and we're raising the roof. And I remember while it was happening thinking, this is such a dumb thing to do for a living. In a great way. That this is a job right now, as opposed to just a thing that I paid to do.
So great. Okay, yeah, over here. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
So of your favorite moment on SNL and your favorite moment on late night, what were they? And if you had to pick one or the other, which one were they?
Well, I pick SNL even before I know what the reasons are, because I was younger. And I just I liked that. People always ask if I miss SNL, and the answer is I miss being young. Yeah, I mean, there were so many on SNL. I mean,
Stefan's wedding with Bill Hader, like that. I remember, I don't know if you remember how it worked, but we were live at the desk, and then he ran off, and then I ran off and chased him, and then I went to a pre-tape. And I was backstage with Bill, and then we were gonna run back in, and he was gonna have on a wedding veil, and we were gonna be holding hands, and then we were gonna shoot confetti, and it was his last show, and we were standing backstage, and we were watching it on the monitor, and we were gonna run in holding hands, and then we just started holding hands backstage. And we were holding hands watching this video, and we both got like genuinely emotional. Like it was the end of an era. It was his last show, it was Fred's last show, it was Jason's last show. The previous year, Andy and Kristen left. I would leave, I think, halfway through the next season to do late night. And so it was the end of this really special time. You could just feel it. And we were holding hands, we were both getting emotional. And I remember thinking, that was May, it was the season finale, and I was getting married for real in September. And I just remember holding Bill's hands as we were both crying. And I was thinking, oh, I better cry at my real wedding. And I did. That was the good news today. But there was, and so the thing about, I've had great moments at late night, and it probably was like, because I do like emotional moments, because I have them genuinely when I'm doing these shows, because they mean a lot to me. I can't believe I get to do this for a living. Especially with that moment, I was a part of a thing at SNL in a way that was really special, and being friends with those people and being friends with them today. But like that was probably number one for me.
Me.
I know you. Okay, over there, whoever just said me.
Thank you. I'm very thirsty. I was in the back. Hi, my name is Lacey. I'm a comedian. I'm on this show called iCarly, but I did UCB and
Great.
did Second City and all of that. And I love your career, Seth, and the Weekend Update desk. My question is, so when you did the Weekend Update, obviously that feels like a path to late night.
Yeah.
It's basically that essentially. But you produced Amber Ruffin's show, and I was curious what that pitch was like, because I'm a Black woman, I do comedy, and I was very interested, and I love that you support her so much. You're such a genuine ally and cool ass person. I'm very interested in what that pitch looked like.
Well, the nice thing about that show was the pitch was the work she was already doing on our show, and so that was where we felt the payoff of giving her a platform was not just that it made our show so much better, which it did, but it also showed off to the network hey, here's this insane talent, and if you guys don't move and do something with her, other people get NBC, they can see it on TV and they can and they realize that. And so, because I think it's sometimes hard to pitch cold and explain to people why this is a thing and why somebody will be good. And so what we've always tried to do, and right now Amber, we're lucky that Amber's working for both shows, but if the day should come which we're sure will come one day, where she will be too busy with her own things. We want to make sure that slot goes to somebody else that we can show off, and so that's what we really just try to do.
And in line with that, you support women in general. You are a big supporter of women on television,
Very nice.
in front of the camera and behind the camera.
But I should really say, again, sometimes you're really lucky how your career started, and I came up at a time at SNL where Tina Fey was the head writer and Amy Poehler was, basically the team captain. And it is a reminder that every time you have a chance to staff a show, you're not just taking care of that moment in time. It is going to be, educational and prescriptive for people who are there. Be oh, this is how you do it. And then and so I was really lucky that I came up at a time like that.
To be commended. There are so many hands here, so how about that one right there? Yeah, right in back of you, right there.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, Seth. The earlier talk about Ethan, the little door in the attic, somehow I started having a flashback. And I'm sure you've talked about this, and I apologize because I obviously missed it. But I remember one of the bright spots for me of that time in the pandemic was your show and the intimacy, which the circumstances obviously created. I loved when I started seeing all the Thornbirds.
Thank you.
It was just like themes at a certain age, but also and then there were more, and then they shifted around.
Yeah.
How did that whole thing
So
Start.
I did like 3 shows in the beginning before I knew where to do the show. I had a friend who had a garage, and I was like, oh, garage would be good. And then my buddy on my YouTube friend who connected was like, a garage is literally the worst place to do it. He's like, it's so echoey and you are dumb. But there was a bookshelf behind me. And it was, early pandemic, I think one thing we were all doing is like looking at what books people had on their bookshelves. And so a bunch of people were like, I can't believe Seth Meyers has a Thornbirds, copy of the Thornbirds. And then I just thought that was really funny because I was like, oh my God, the Thornbirds is a book. If you were of a certain age, every single house you went to in the 70s and 80s had a copy of the Thornbirds. And so then I was like, oh, I'm just gonna have it wherever I go. And so then I was like, oh, I'm gonna, because we would do a closer look, and in the body of a closer look, you cut to, clips. And I was like, oh, when the clip comes, I'll just switch. There'll be 2 Thornbirds, or I'll move it. And then I started like contacting the art department and being like, I need you to make. I was like doing anagrams of Thornbirds. Then I was putting Thornbirds in copies of other books. So like it would start, the episode would start, and I'd have a copy of Thornbirds, and on top of it, I'd have like George Orwell's 1984. And then they would both be gone, and there would just be 1980 Thorn. And like, there were so many of those. But that was. And it was not, again, it wasn't like, it's the opposite of crushing. It wasn't like, everybody loves the Thornbirds bit. But there was something really fun about doing it for the people who were watching it. Like, I'm like, some people love it. And then people would mention it. And then there would be people on YouTube who were like, am I going crazy, or is he moving around the Thornbird? And so much of that time, and it was the reason I was really worried about having a live audience back, which happened in October this year, is we just were building in all this, lore is too big a word for it, but like bits. We were doing bits because we had this confidence that the same people were watching the show every night. Whereas when you're with the studio audience, they're great, and I love it. And why I really love it is I get the sense that they are the same people who were there with us in the attic. But sometimes you get the sense that if you have a studio audience on Tuesday, they didn't watch the show on Monday. Whereas the home audience who watches on Tuesday, you have a higher confidence they watch on Monday. And there's a lot more of them. And so all of a sudden we have this shift of like, hey, we should be doing things for the people who are with us every night. They might not be with us, live in an audience, but like it's really fun to do things where you're basically saying by doing a bit like that, like if you see this, it's for you. And it tickled us to no end. So.
All right. We've got time for a couple more, and I don't know, who has the best question out there?
Over here. Dude.
Over there?
Yep.
Right there?
Over here.
Bring the mic.
All right, so I have 2 really quick questions.
Get the mic.
Here, hold this. Here, hold this.
Okay.
I have 2 quick questions. Great. Real quick. Were you jealous when Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon decided to switch each other on April Fools?
No, because I feel like you had to travel.
And when are we going to see the Sea Captain again?
Well, sadly the Sea Captain, is in storage right now. But hopefully he'll come back. That was another fun bit. That was way more polarizing than the Thornbirds. Because the Thornbirds you either noticed, nobody hated the Thornbirds, you either noticed it, loved it, or didn't know what was happening. Whereas the Sea Captain was very hard too, but again, it was a fun time to just say to people, I know you hate this, but I'm losing my fucking mind.
Dude, no, it was the best. It was the fucking best.
Okay, I got time for one more. All right, you're irresistible right here. Go.
So my question is, I'm a very old person, so I watched Johnny Carson for many years.
Yeah.
And I used to love how when Johnny couldn't be there, Joan Rivers or whoever would sub. I've never seen you do that, and my question is, instead of your writing staff, excluding them, who would be that one person you would throw to and say, if I had to have a sub?
Yeah, if I had to have a sub, who would I be? I mean, it's weird. Letterman, right? I'd say
that would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Pete Hammond. Pete Hammond.
Yeah, but that kid still do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be
Your dad. Living or dead?
Living or dead?
Your dad.
Benjamin Franklin.
Somebody said your dad.
If my dad did it, I would never hit the desk I would never in a million years.
But he's always there on Thanksgiving.
He's always there on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's wonderful.
Rhiannon.
Wally.
Rhiannon.
This is getting out of control. Let's thank Seth Meyers.